Are you tired of wasting time on entertainment that doesn't bring you a sense of community? Do you feel like people are trying to force you to take a side in this silly culture war? Does your media have you feeling too conservative, too woke, too religious, too heathenous, not enough whatever, like a freak? That's because you're not a character. You're a real person. You're messy, and you don't fit into a box. Good news, we're freaks too.
Would you like to melt your stress away? Get connected to a community of other misfits? Maybe listen to the misfits? Stop feeling like a lonely outsider surrounded by people trying to enlist you in a war you want no part of. Become a contented member of a community that requires only that you live your best life and leave others to live theirs.
Feel a sense of belonging while opting out of the culture war. This is Peace Freaks. Welcome, everyone, to a special bonus episode of Peace Freaks here. I am Nikki, all by my lonesome. Lizzie is not in the studio with me at this exact moment because I decided to do something a little different. And different today means monologue. And it's going to be a monologue because, frankly, I just thought this piece I wrote for the website couldn't fit any better than it does with this particular episode that we recorded with Mr. Remso Martinez on the state of the comic book industry. So, welcome to a Marvel-fueled episode. Let's get in. Teams, Tribes, and the XMen. I had a strange moment today while rewatching the old XMen animated series. As with all the old cartoons from my childhood that I've been rewatching like a professional adult, I noticed a lot of messaging not so subtly stuffed into the shows. The episode that triggered me today was specifically episode 66 in season 5, No Mutant is an Island. Airing on September 21st, 1996, directed by Larry Houston and written by Sandy Chesney. The episode centered around Cyclops leaving the X-Men after the Dark Phoenix drama takes Jean Grey from him. He took off on a what-does-it-all-mean quest that dropped him off the steps of the orphanage he was raised in. As it turns out, Sarah, a girl from then that was always nice to him and also knew he was a mutant, now runs the orphanage with financial help from a strange wealthy benefactor, Zebediah Kilgrave. Kilgrave turned out to be the villain of the episode and had been bankrolling the orphanage as a way to ensure a stream of damaged mutant children he could use for his own aspirations to power. He also turned out to be a mutant himself, who was mind-controlling the children in a plot to take political power and utilize that power to turn the tables on humanity. The idea seemed so familiar. Consider the following quotes. "Obey me. The future is now. We will be respected. We will overcome their hatred with brute strength. We will lead." Or how about this one? "You are one of the chosen. Soon you will not hide your powers. You won't deny who you are just to be accepted. You will be the politicians, the bankers, the community leaders. The American dream will become a reality for every mutant, young and old. And when you're in charge, we'll make them pay for the way they've treated us." The thought that seemed to rattle around in my head as Kilgrave monologued was how eerily similar his methodology and goals were to the people around me that would be considered social justice warriors. Their unwavering assuredness in their own righteousness was echoed in Kilgrave's words. He deserved his chance to rule. There was no idea of equality. There was only our turn. And sadly, I understood the sentiment. I'm a bleeding heart myself and have found it difficult to fault anyone for wanting to right the systemic wrongs of history and balance the scales. The conceit itself is a farce, though. The scale can never be balanced because despite what essentialists would like you to believe, there are only individuals. No scale, just a table on a single point where all the pieces move around freely and according to their own will. The table shifts and slides, but the nature of individuality keeps it even on net, because it's difficult to gather the necessary power to a single spot. The idea of a scale necessitates binaries, and would by default force us to cling to the very idea that causes its need, thinking we have teams. Look throughout history, there's only one group of people who have made out when we created teams. Typically, it's been the people selling those teams weapons. The groups who really hoped you wouldn't recognize how much they look like a team opposite you and your enemies. They rigged it so no matter what teams arise, they'd be outside the game, not playing. So what the hell happened? In the episode, it was clear to Cyclops that no lasting peace could be founded on force. All this would do was perpetuate the war. Yet the same line of reasoning espoused by Kilgrave seems to have been internalized by my generation. 1 million Kilgraves have managed to fulfill his plans as politicians, bankers, and community leaders with their own vendettas. These individuals have galvanized the opposition for the next team in a perpetual us-versus-them battle. Throughout the series, Xavier repeatedly tries to reframe the discussion on equality. He asks both sides to refuse to fight. It doesn't matter where it started because we all write ourselves the hero in our narrative. The only way to get to a future where peace is the norm is to voluntarily put down arms on both sides and refuse their teams. It's the only scenario where we could satisfy our egos and achieve an equality. While others join teams, Find tribes instead. I see tribes as fundamentally different than teams. Perhaps it's a pedantic semantic argument, but I see teams as inherently adversarial preoccupations on power that require a sublimation of the individual. Tribes, on the other hand, can be celebrations of shared experience that bolster individuality. No single tribe needs to be your core identity and can be voluntarily taken on or dropped as an individual sees fit, or as many as you like. They are the very idea of decentralization and are an anti-binary by their very nature. Maybe I'm wrong. When I know how I wanted to resonate with Kilgrave, I wanted to press the scales and give a victory to the marginalized, but it would only serve to galvanize the other side for the next battle. I have rejected continuing any war. What about those who have not? Kilgrave's words echoed in my head hours after having finished the episode. Maybe they've echoed in my generation's soul for the past couple decades. All right, folks, hope you enjoyed that. Hope it wasn't too weird. I was pretty happy with myself for having written it. And like I said, I think it goes great with this interview that we were about to have on here. So, get prepped. Let's talk comic books with Remso Martinez. Hilariously enough, that guy that I just dropped off that stuff got out of his car wearing a mask, and then just sent the liquor he paid me on the porch, keeping social distancing norms.
That's beautiful. I hope one good thing that sticks out of this is in Virginia we can actually order whiskey and bourbon directly from distilleries now.
Yeah,
which is pretty cool. I hope that stays.
Well, it's so many of these regulations they've relaxed in this difficult time, as they like to say, and it just makes you wonder why did we have to have them in the first place?
Yeah. I still have to pay taxes on everything, but at least now I can have my bourbon delivered to me.
You're right.
So, not to change pace or change direction abruptly, but so when we were initially talking, the reason that we kind of suggested this is because I've been real interested and concerned about the economics of a particular industry that I know you are an expert on, and that is the comic book industry.
This is the real news.
Frankly, it's definitely going to make more waves than people think it is, because if nothing else, the comic book industry, which is the industry itself, made less money last year than a single Marvel movie.
Yeah.
The problem is that Marvel pulls all their stories from the comic book industry. And so whatever happens to the comic book industry has a ripple effect through the film industry, which does have huge impact on our economy. And right now, we're in the throes of watching the comic book industry just outright collapse and free fall. And who knows in what way it will ever recover. Within the first week, there were comic book shops that had said they'll never open their doors again because they can't. So, you're someone who's kind of ground zero, as having been someone you've got a comic book shop that you support. What are some of the things you've seen just with them that have been going on?
The one thing that just completely nut punched them was the fact that Diamond's Distributors, the one publishing, printing arm of the comic book industry, they publish everything from DC to Marvel to even IDW and Dark Horse.
Yeah.
They just completely shut down printing. And that freaked people out because comic book stores, they make a majority of their actual raw gross income from back issues of comics. So the old stuff. So what you're hoping is you have a small number of hardcore collectors that are going to go in and buy large volumes of back issue comics, ranging from the $1 stuff to the really expensive stuff. So what this all did was this basically said, because you're a non-essential store, or because you have to abide by these stupid social distancing policies, you need to go ahead and do that. And what these comic book stores did was they did just that because they want to follow the law. Well, for a lot of those folks that would go in and touch all the comics and they put their stacks together and they'd spend a long time there, they weren't doing that. So that hit them almost immediately. But then with Diamond Distributors, they went ahead and they just said, we have to halt all printing and, mailing of all new comics. Well, the thing that keeps a lot of these stores afloat are the regular subscriptions they get from pull boxes from customers. This lets them know what their total income for the end of the month is going to be. It's one of the only predictable things that comic book stores, brick and mortar stores, still have going for them. So when readers were told that your comics aren't going to be coming out for an unnamed amount of time, suddenly a lot of these stores that were just able to stay afloat and make some profit, now they have no guarantee of that. And what made it worse was both Marvel and DC, as soon as that announcement came, they didn't say anything about it. And that freaked out a lot of stores because regardless as to whether you're on Team Marvel or Team DC, Marvel is what keeps the brick and mortar stores running, mainly because of the films. And the reason why a lot of stores are freaking out about that specifically was because you have digital comics that are released the same day as print comics. So usually, if you've got your house in order, you will have the next 2 to 3 comics already made. So that way you're not playing catch up right before the due date for when you have to send it to the printers. Marvel was just like, maybe we can go ahead and just keep releasing the digital stuff on the day that it was supposed to be released, and then we'll just go ahead and, publish it in print. And if people want the print, they can go do that. Well, that kind of spoils the fun if you want to really keep up with your story and you've already spent money on something, regardless of whether it's print or digital. That's going to go ahead and harm a lot of people that are like, why don't I just get digital? Or why don't I just wait about a year for the trade paperback graphic novel to come out? So instantly the comic shop started just erupting. And DC still didn't say anything.
Has DC said anything at this point?
Yes. Only because of the outrage that was aimed at Marvel. So everyone starts flipping out. And the good thing that I saw about this was a lot of the readers were like, you can't do this to these comic book stores. You can't do this to people that still like getting their paper comics. So fandom actually rose up and said, no, don't air digital comics on the same day release. Honor the same day release policy, 1 digital for 1 paper. So Marvel went ahead and said, fine, we're going to go ahead and postpone all of our dates for when new releases come out. So that way, when they start coming again in print, we will do the same day release. So Marvel did that. And then DC went out and said, okay, that seems popular. We're just going to do that. But then here's where things also get really screwed up. You'd think that Marvel would go ahead and try and keep the people that really keep them afloat, the comic book shops. You'd think they would do something as kind of like an industry courtesy, as a thank you for, still buying in bulk loads our stuff to keep these comic book stores afloat. No. So now everyone's freaking out. They're like, Marvel, you're the one brand that really keeps these stores going. Are you going to do anything? So then DC, once again, playing second stringer, they see that and they're like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go ahead and set up a trust where basically we're going to lobby for donations from, people in the industry, people in Hollywood, fans can donate, and we're going to cover something equivalent to the Paycheck Protection Program. So basically, we're going to try and cover the next 30 or 60 days worth of bills for these comic book stores so they can pay rent and pay their staff. And DC did that. And so far, they've helped over 1,000 stores, which sounds like a lot. But when you think about it, there are only probably 1,300 still left in the country.
Yeah.
And a whole ton have had to close permanently because of this. So DC does that. But then what Jim Lee, the publisher of DC, what he also did, if you know Jim Lee, you know that his artwork is revolutionary. He did the XMen in the 90s. He did Batman Hush, one of the most definitive lines.
I love his old stuff. He's a great artist.
Yeah, he's one of the best in the business. What he started doing was he started saying, hey, I'm going to go ahead and start doing limited edition sketches and prints for people, and we're going to auction them, and I'm going to pick a couple stores, and we're just going to go ahead and toss them the money from it. And Jim Lee has made almost I think it's more than $500,000 as of reporting.
Oh, wow.
It's insane. So DC, even though they could have been the leader in actually making all these great decisions, they know at the end of the day, because most people are going there for a Marvel comic, that might be the only time someone sees another DC comic. And then they might pick it up as an impulse rather than I went there with the intention of getting it. So DC, even though they played second string at Marvel in these decisions, they've made the better decisions throughout. So it's been a time where, fandom spoke up, these local businesses, really made their concerns noted. And when Marvel was screwing things up, DC at least did make the right decision. But ultimately, I mean, Shona Comics is one of the biggest comic book stores in Alabama. I used to go there like, once or twice a month. I'd drive 3 hours from Marion, Alabama to Tuscaloosa to go to that place. I mean, the store was off the charts awesome. He had all the games, he had all the statues, all the comics, all the back issues. It was a great store. And literally within 30 days of the state shutting down, he basically had to say, I can't do this. I have to shut down. I'm not given a choice. Like, this isn't me shutting down for now. Like, I can't cover rent if no one's buying any of my stuff. Like, I can't even get rid of the back issues. So his store is dead. And for, as far as my store is concerned, like they had to start doing massive discounts on stuff right before the whole lockdown started here in Virginia. Like, I gave the manager like a $20 bill just to put in the register. So they had cash on hand. And, I went in and I bought as much stuff as I could to keep it going. Stuff where I'm like, I don't really want this, but let's do it. And now I'm at the point where it's like, for me financially, I can't go back to my comic book store for at least another month or so, because now I need to start preserving cash. Right. So now what they've done is, fandom is tapped out.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Now, one of the things, and you kind of pointed it out, I think, talking about that place in Alabama, is that I don't want people to go across thinking that this is a brand new thing.
Yeah.
And that all of these businesses in this industry was working just fine before all this happened, because nothing could be further from the truth. Like,
exactly.
The structure of the comic book industry itself is designed to not work well. In particular, you have the fact that you only have one publisher for all those comics, Diamond.
Yeah.
And to me, there's some outright predatory ways in which the comic book companies themselves kind of fuck their fans over. And that, like, one of the things that I repeatedly hear about is the multiple variants, which is just a blatant cash grab against people that are completists.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, well, these people feel a need to have everything of this, so you'll go and make something, like, I've heard, like, up to, like, 8 variants of the same issue. Like, you'll get an issue number 1.
Then they do the reprinting, and then they do variants for the reprinting.
Yeah.
Gosh.
And so you're just trying to soak the shit out of these people who their only crime is fucking loving the property that you have. And meanwhile, you have the other side of this, which is, if there's any villain to be taken as, I think worse than the companies themselves are a lot of the creators who are openly disdainful of an entire half of their audience. Because if you want to see how awful, how split down the middle culture really is, go and hang out and follow some Twitter people, or some some of the Twitter personalities that are big in the comic book movement. And the thing you're going to see is how much they absolutely loathe the people that buy their comics.
It's like Ebola for the soul.
I've never. It's like the worst section of Twitter imaginable is some of the shit that you'll see from comic book artists, and just the things that they'll tell their fans to go do.
Yeah, the biggest critic I've seen is probably Heather Antos, who was previously at Marvel. Now she's in charge of Valiant Entertainment, and I'm a big Valiant buff. Like, when you get into Valiant comics, like, they're one of those titles that you only know about because you go to the stores, because they are very small and they just don't have the support broad stream across the culture that DC and Marvel have. So, like, if you're a Valiant fan, you're a hardcore nerd at that point. But Heather Antos hates men. I would call her slightly racist, because, she classifies all white men as all just one ambiguous evil entity. And then, I mean, she'll say things like she wants to destroy the industry. The problem with the comic book industry is the comic book readers. And it's like, I feel really torn sometimes, because I love Valiant. And even since she came on board a few years ago, I still buy her shit because I think it's good. But, it's also somebody that doesn't like me.
Yeah.
Without even knowing me. So it's really weird in a sense. I mean, it goes on.
Well, she hates me more than you. You're a man, but I mean, at least you're a colored man.
Yeah, I have some social victimhood points, but right. I mean, it's the same thing for some of the people at Marvel. I mean, Marvel itself has just, I truly believe that Marvel Entertainment hates their fans.
That She-Hulk writer who said that basically anyone who watches South Park is responsible for destroying our planet, basically.
South Park and UFC. It's like, Who reads She-Hulk?
Yeah.
It's not women. Women don't read
No.
She-Hulk. Men read She-Hulk.
Well, and that's been the craziest thing about all this is that this industry exists in a place where it wants its fans to be one thing and its fans are not that thing. Like you want the ultra woke people to be your audience, but those fucking people aren't buying the comics. The comics are being bought by middle-aged old white dudes in most cases.
Yeah.
I mean, not to say that there aren't fans of other stripes, but I mean that's the core of the demographic.
Yeah.
Because most of them are people that like. That's why back issues are so important to the culture because it's the guys that are getting stuff that they didn't have the money for when they were kids to read through everything, and so they're going back to their childhood. Like eventually, I don't think there will be a comic book industry in the fashion it is, just because it's an industry that focuses so much on nostalgia. In the same way, eventually CDs are going to go away and I'm going to be pissed because I still like to have the tangible CD. But I also realize that, like, that's a niche market. And the problem, like, once again, is that it's not that I don't even mind the fact that comic books themselves are a niche market. Like, that's something that you can deal with. It's the idea that comic books are a niche market, but they're the training ground for a huge, huge market, which is the film world.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is that for most part, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is like you'll say the big outward projection of this, was largely void of a lot of the issues that were going on in the comic book issue. Now, they started to creep in where you have, like, say, Captain Marvel, who is shoehorned into this system because Disney picked up the system.
Quick question. Did you like that movie?
I never even bothered to watch it. They told me it wasn't for me. I don't go to movies that they say aren't for me.
You shouldn't go to.
I'm going to say something that a lot of people might not expect me to say. I watched it in IMAX, and I think it's a good movie. I have not watched it again. It does not have the rewatch value of some of the others. But that's another thing. Like, I know that it would have bothered me if I did not see Captain Marvel, even for the one or...
Which is why everyone saw it.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it was a guilty thing. Like, people didn't want to admit they saw it. But it's like, I don't go there because I don't think the movie's going to suck. I'm go there because, like you, I was told not to go see it.
Well, and I still haven't seen Black Panther. And by the way, Black Panther was...
told you not to go see it.
Black Panther
was so good.
I'm well aware, but they told me it wasn't made for me. By the way, I'm probably one of the few people that actually had read Black Panther as a kid. Like, I liked that comic.
What's hilarious about Black Panther specifically, like, Black Panther wasn't even made for the people they were saying to go see it. I went to go see it premiere night in IMAX. I'm seeing people dressed in, like, traditional, Congolese garb. We have a large immigrant community from the Congo. I'm seeing a dude wearing, like, an old Black Panthers, jacket and the beret. And it's like, you people didn't read this. You didn't read this because, Black Panther is like one of probably the only black characters in comics who did not start off as a pimp, a drug dealer, or a criminal.
Yeah.
I will openly admit that. Black Panther is a king. He's a genius. He's a billionaire. He's a James Bond-esque badass. I get it. I totally understand it. But he was not
you feel like you're headed to Mary Sueism right there.
Yeah, I mean, it's in a way, like, it's just one of those things that came about. And those are Stan Lee's words.
Mm-hmm.
Stan Lee was one of the biggest advocates for Black Panther when he introduced him in 1967, right before, RFK was killed and MLK was killed. Like, he was big for that. So I'm only going off of what the creator's sentiments were. That's from Stan Lee, a Jewish guy from New York. But it's one of those things where it's like, they want this crowd of people to love them who don't love the things that keep them afloat. And I will go ahead and say that I think fandom as a whole is more diverse than really anyone gives it credit for. But when you're looking at just the comics themselves, and you hit this right on the head, the people buying the back issues, the people that are buying the new series regularly, that are subscribing, they are traditionally middle-aged white men.
Yeah.
But that's not a bad thing. It's like, who buys Mary Kay products? Middle-aged white women.
Yeah.
Well, and I think what's even worse, our audience knows I bring it up all the time, probably to the point they're annoyed with it. But so I was a huge fan of the first season of Jessica Jones on Netflix. I thought that season fucking was great. I loved it. You're watching a girl go out and kick ass. I have nothing against creating content for marginalized people, if you want to say, like, there's a core of my person as the classic lefty I was. That's all about that. The problem is those people get shortchanged so fucking much in this because they get shitty comics. Like, they get bad writing to shoehorn an agenda in. Like, from season 1 to season 2 of Jessica Jones, it stopped being about a girl kicking ass, which I thought she did great in the first season. And then in the second season, it became about lecturing me about how I'm evil because I have a dick, which...
I watched one episode of season 2 and that was out.
Well, I managed to get 4 in, and then I'm like, I'm sick of fucking hearing this, so I just shut it off. I'm like, I'll never watch it again. And it was because it was attacking me personally. And the fact of the matter is like, the episodes weren't good enough to warrant all the fucking lecturing they were getting. It like takes you out of what's going on in the story. So you're trying to help these people by, I don't know, if you want to spread your ideology, usually the best way to do that isn't to fucking the people you're trying to lecture, turn them away with bad writing.
Yeah, I mean, two really great examples of how not to do it are Miles Morales and RiRi Williams. I really don't think that unless you love love RiRi for the reason that she's the anti-Tony Stark, you really know about her. But she's going to be a character that I know Disney Plus wants to give her a series, and you're going to be forced to love her. And if you don't, you hate women of color.
Gotcha.
But like Miles Morales, like I was Spider-Man brought me into comics. Spider-Man will always have a place in my heart. But Miles Morales, in my own opinion, I think is actually a better Spider-Man. And Miles Morales, just in terms of characters as a whole, I think is one of the best characters in comics today. Because when they introduced Miles, it was after they had done years of the Ultimate Spider-Man series. And then they did this beautiful arc, The Death of Spider-Man. So then when Miles came into the picture, it made sense. And they introduced him and he had a personality. And Miles was just Miles. And Miles happened to be, part black, part Puerto Rican, which for me, Puerto Ricans are never seen in popular culture. And if anyone of Latino characteristics is, they're usually, what
Cholo.
Are they? A gangbanger, a cholo, or a drug dealer. So for me to see somebody who was part Puerto Rican as Spider-Man, I totally understand that. But here's the thing, though. They did it right. He had a character arc. He had character progression. People who are white men love Miles Morales. And he didn't, he replaced Spider-Man for a little bit, but now you can have your Peter Parker Spider-Man and your Miles Morales. You get both. If you don't want one, you get the other. Then you have RiRi Williams, who I think is an abomination of comic book characters because she was shoehorned in basically to be the anti-Tony Stark. She's a 15-year-old genius. She's black and she's a woman. I read some of her stuff. I can't tell you a single positive thing about her because she had no personality. She had no character progression. We were just told you have to love her or else you're terrible. And even now, people who wanted to like her as a character, they're like, yeah, Ironheart's just not doing it for me.
Yeah, well, it all comes back to writing. Like you said, the key to Miles is they wrote a character. And it's like in the movies where they race swap people and then they act like it's not a thing. The fact of the matter is, it's like, I'm sorry, you want to try and make a black Bruce Wayne? You have a lot of fucking things to explain, like how the fuck that dude became that rich in the era that he existed in. You can't pretend that that's not a thing.
In the Detroit of the DC universe.
Right.
Yeah, like why is that guy able to be a billionaire playboy coming out of the 1950s? Like that doesn't make any fucking sense.
Well, they tried to make him Chinese recently in an original graphic novel.
Interesting.
Like, this is bad timing. It just came out too. But it's always, you said it perfectly. It comes down to the writing. I got flack from a personal friend because I said one of the worst decisions Marvel Comics made was when they made Iceman gay. Iceman forever was my favorite X-Man. And if you know Iceman, he's a player. He dated Kitty Pryde, Mystique. He got all of them. So he was awesome. Then they made him gay and they said it's permanent and it's canon. That's what bothered me. So I was called homophobic. But no one ever asked me how I felt about John Constantine, the Hellblazer. That's one of my favorite Vertigo comics from DC. If you know anything about John Constantine, which all these people throwing out these labels that actual fans don't know, John Constantine was not only the first gay character, he was also the first bisexual character. He was also the first interspecies character. But why don't I complain about John Constantine? Because that's how Neil Gaiman and the others created him to be. And that makes sense for him.
Yeah.
And I would love to see a Hellblazer movie. I have not seen Justice League Dark Apocalypse War yet, where apparently they make a joke about him having dated King Shark. Spoiler alert. But that doesn't bother me because that's John Constantine. So it's funny because of that.
Which is, I think, a lot of what they did right with the the Deadpool character. Like you have a vehicle right there that you can do all that shit with, and yet I feel like they missed the mark a little bit on it. But you're shoehorning it into characters that have these established and don't pretend. Oh well, it's not made for you, like that whole shit. Well, it still has to fucking make narrative sense for it to be a certain way. You have a Deadpool who has been openly, if we won't say bisexual, he is at the very least.
He'll jump on anything that moves.
Yeah, exactly. He's at least fucking flirty as fuck. Like, isn't there like a narrative like with him and Wolverine
Colossus,
that's openly
Wolverine?
like,
the thing with him and Wolverine is him and Wolverine, it's so homoerotic, it's funny. But like when in the scene in Deadpool 2 where Colossus is carrying Wade and Wade's doing all that inappropriate shit with his hands, like I'm laughing my butt off. But that's Deadpool. And I love Deadpool.
Exactly. It makes sense.
Yeah.
It's incredibly frustrating because when they go and they try and make a big deal about it, how about this? What are your thoughts on America Chavez? Are there even words for it?
I don't know where to start. I don't know where to start. I know who the character is. I know the backstory and everything. But America, the character itself is a vehicle for hatred.
Mm-hmm.
Because all she does, I can't tell you a single villain she fought. I can't tell you how anything actually ever challenged her. I can't tell you who she ever got along with because she doesn't really get along with anybody.
Holy menstruation. Let's just put it that way. That's something that happens in fucking dialogue. Like, the period jokes is what that character's about, apparently. We won't even get into the crappy artwork, but...
I mean, it's just... she was made to make people not want to read comics that she was included in. Pure and simple. Pure and simple.
If you want to hate comics, folks, go look up some America Chavez cells on... there's plenty of them that you can find. So...
Like somebody, I made a comment about that. I tried to listen to the Women of Marvel podcast, which was good for like 2 episodes. Then they really showed their true colors. Like somebody, I mentioned Women of Marvel podcast is terrible. And they're like, well, that's because you have a problem with women creators and you have a problem with, a Miss America type figure not being, blonde and white. And I'm like, bitch, one of my first celebrity crushes was Miss New York 2012.
Oh, yeah.
Muslim and beautiful. It's like you're painting me with all these colors that don't apply to me. And it has to do with the context of the situation. Miles Morales is great for the reason that RiRi Williams is terrible. It's that they put no work into one and they spent years developing the other.
Well, so you'll never have to deal with the fact that this is a legit thing. I'm not making this up. I have been told this. Well, the reason I married my wife is colonization. That's how we colonialize now, is by marrying black women. I don't love her. It's just, I'm acting out my white patriarchy.
Wow. Does she know that?
I know, right?
You know that?
I mean, I feel like that's almost more insulting to me. Like, okay, so like I couldn't legitimately get someone to like me, like,
and that's the way these people think, and it's so frustrating. Like, how do you reach someone that believes something that at their core?
Yeah.
Like, one of my favorite characters of all time was Tank Girl, and what terrifies me.
Mm-hmm.
And who's making her movie?
Margot Robbie.
Yeah.
The person who ruined Harley Quinn, and it has more to do with the fact that she
Birds
didn't.
Of Prey?
I didn't even bother.
Did anyone see Birds of Prey?
I did on premiere night.
Oh, Remso.
I need to stop giving them my money.
I don't watch a lot of movies like in theaters and stuff anyways.
Yeah.
But I was tempted to go watch Sonic just to fucking shit on their parade. And that's everyone like acts like pissing on Birds of Prey was the reason Sonic was popular.
Yeah, no, and it wasn't.
The reason Sonic was popular is because you had people that had a company fucking listen to them for the first time.
Yeah.
Like, they went out there and they made it known they didn't like the way that they were going to make that character. And so somebody went and spent an extra $1 million fucking dollars to redo an entire fucking movie to make the fans happy. And what happened when they did that? The fucking windfall of money from appreciating fucking nerds. It's one of the most successful movies of last year just based on income output.
And I mean, its runtime in theaters was cut in half too.
Yeah, they couldn't have set it up better to be like a vote with your dollars sort of a situation, though. Like, do you want us to listen to the fans or don't you?
Well, and so here's some of the crazy stuff. So when that whole thing was going on, if people are curious, I'd recommend looking up The Quartering. He covered it really good in YouTube. But one of the things that really struck me, and it started, I think, with Captain Marvel in earnest, is the appropriation of fucking Rotten Tomatoes and the fake reviews and all of the tactics that were used. Like, one of the things that still has not been really accounted for is the fact that there are a lot of theater owners saying that they had a lot of empty seats during Captain Marvel. And it's not just one anymore. Like, a lot of them have come out and started saying, yeah, I have whole weekends where, like, entire rows were empty. People paid for them and just never showed up. And that's not normal for theaters.
My brother and I were the only people in the theaters for Birds of Prey. No joke.
Mm-hmm. You can see that there's like this online manipulation. Like, one of the things, like, they literally tried to paint Sonic the Hedgehog as a racist movie. Like, in the reviews that were being posted about it, people saying that they went to theaters and saw it before it was ever in theaters. Like, they're just blatantly lies to try and ruin this movie, all because another movie.
The same thing was done. Yeah, I mean, the same thing was done for Venom in 2018. Venom ruined A Star Is Born.
Is it the same audience?
Interesting.
Apparently, Rotten Tomatoes thought it was the same audience.
Jeez.
And the thing is if you follow the paper trail long enough for Rotten Tomatoes, why does Rotten Tomatoes make the calls that it makes? Because they're owned by a company that makes movies. Like, they're no longer a private entity. They are basically a shill organization that fronts acting like a. Now, it'd be one thing if they'd actually do what they're supposed to do and take reviews, but then you see things where what was it? They stopped it at an 86% film score, and it hasn't moved in like 6 months now. What movie was that? Do you remember?
Oh, was it the Joker?
It might have been. Yeah.
No, it was the Joker. They deleted all of the reviews, so people actually saw it.
They unleashed all their hatred on that.
Well, they did, and look what good it did. Yeah, you have to wonder if, like, maybe these people just want these movies to be successful for some reason.
This is why I still go see films irregardless of it, because I have such love for the source material, and I'm such a fan of cinema. I will go and pay good money to see a terrible movie that everyone told me was terrible, but ultimately I have to make my own opinion of it. Sure. I thought, I think the last couple Spider-Man films, Homecoming and Far From Home, I don't like them. I think they're bad Spider-Man movies. Mm-hmm. I thought Birds of Prey was a good action film, but it was not about the Birds of Prey.
Well, I mean, they didn't even have the Birds of Prey as they would have been included in the comic books in the fucking movie.
You want to talk about character female empowerment, you talk about Cassandra Cain, who's an ass-kicking ninja warrior who's so cool in the comics, and they made her, a chubby 12-year-old girl who steals things and can't defend herself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the shit that they're trying to make these things to include people, and then they end up making, as a great example of this, I know this has been talked about by other people, we haven't mentioned it, the New Warriors. Which to me is one of the most
my heart's racing. I'm actually getting angry. Like, I'm physically getting mad.
The harder they pander, the worse it seems to be for the people, the communities that they're trying to do good for. Like, one of the first things that happens is they have openly non-binary characters, and the people I think that were more pissed off than anybody, because honestly, the people that, like, a lot of the old school fans that we're talking about here, they just gave up. Like, they realize that their own industry hates them, and they listen to most of the shit to just talk shit on it. Like, they'll go and get the comics so they can put up a new YouTube video about how fucking terrible it is. But meanwhile, those communities are complaining, like, this is such an awful representation of us. Like, who do you think you are?
It's an insult to the entire New Warriors brand. And I mean, if people thought that Guardians of the Galaxy were like C-listers, then New Warriors were D-listers. But I mean, you look at, not to spend too much time on this, you look at the original New Warriors crew, you had Night Thrasher, who was black. You never had a black character in charge of a team of superheroes. You had Namora, who may or may not be lesbian. It was always kind of left out there. Then you have Oddball or Speedball, which already sounds like drugs, but like he had ADHD.
Not to be confused with Snowflame.
B negative, Snowflake, Safe Space. It's an insult to the whole series. It's an insult to everybody, because even before it's out, and I think the one positive thing about coronavirus is I think it killed all momentum.
Are they actually releasing it?
In July.
Oh, okay.
But that's the thing.
There you
It keeps being pushed and pushed, and it's actually, the last I heard, it's no longer on the like it had been pushed to a point where they're not actually talking about its release date anymore.
They're thinking of, this is a rumor mill thing I saw in the forums, but they might just have it as a digital series.
Yeah.
Which means they don't have to waste money ordering the prints and then trying to convince comic shop owners who already know that their fans are not going to buy it.
Right.
Well,
Do that.
and so we a lot of us were talking about the comic book shop. So that's another one of those issues. So comic book shops, I don't think people realize this. So they're forced into a situation where they have to order books. They have to order books according to customer tastes, and then they can't return them. So you have you'll say like with a Captain Marvel where they keep re-releasing and keep rebooting. And every time they reboot it, the comic book has to order like a minimum number of copies of the book, but they may never get rid of those books, and then they're stuck with it. They just have to eat that cost of this piece of shit that you sent them that they can't get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
And as things go on, it seems like more and more of the shit they want them to put out is stuff that they know they can't get rid of. So you're just kind of dumping all these you're forcing your comic book shops to eat costs that they otherwise wouldn't have to.
Yeah.
Like because they can't, because once again, because you have Diamond that controls all of the ordering, being the monopoly on that industry.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like at every angle, like you mentioned about that dude in Alabama, owning a comic book shop is a fucking labor of love. Like, you do that because you love comics. Nobody is getting super rich off of comic book shops, I promise you.
Oh, no.
Like,
it's a labor of love.
Yeah, like they're there because they give a shit about comics and they want to preserve this for another generation. So it just feels like you have the major publishers and then you have the, Diamond. They just shit on these people. Like, who the fuck are you? Sell our shit, make us money. And it's unfortunate. On the other hand, you do have people like Ethan Van Sciver that say, fuck all that. The more you talk shit on me, the more I'll go make comics for people that want to pay me. And he's managed to monetize his YouTube channel into one hell of a deal for him. Like, he makes up pretty goddamn good on his Cyberfrog comics that he makes himself, produces himself, and does everything through, crowdfunding. And more publishers are jumping onto that model.
Yeah.
And sorry, when I say publishers, more creators are jumping onto that model. Doug TenNapel, the creator of Earthworm Jim, is releasing a second copy or a second comic in his own series that he created now. So it's interesting to watch like the economic ramifications of people's bad decisions. One of the things I'm curious to see about with the Couve is that with people's money kind of being more tight socially, I'm expecting, and we'll see how this happens, that we're going to get a lot less SJW bullshit in movies because SJW bullshit's never a sure thing.
Go woke, go broke.
Yeah, which keeps proving itself. So I'm hoping we're going to see more of a return to let's make content for the people that want to buy the content because they're the only ones we can rely on to buy it. But you still see, like, with some of these comic book companies, it doesn't seem like they're going that way. It seems like they're just going to fucking double down until the industry's in the ground.
And I mean, it's something that's been happening for years. And I think all this whole pandemic has done is accelerate it. It's bad timing meeting a lot of bad decisions all crashing into each other. So, I mean, I think the only thing that people can do is just, continue to support with your dollars what you like. Continue to support your local comic shop. Sometimes it's less convenient for me to drive out there and pay the full price for things that I could just order a mail subscription from, but I do it because I like the community. I do it because there are things that you get from a comic book store you can't get elsewhere. So ultimately, fandom has shown with this whole thing that it has more power than a lot of the publishers think they have. So I think the only thing to do is just to continue to emphasize that voice and that vote with your dollar.
Goddamn Skippy.
Yeah.
So we've kept you on here a while. I guess my last question is, where can people go and find out more about you? What do you got new things on the horizon? Are you allowed to kind of say what you're going to be talking about yet, or are you kind of keeping everything under wraps?
Yeah, absolutely. My new show, On the Run with Remso W. Martinez, premieres on the We Are Libertarians Network this Monday, which is going to be awesome. So by the time you're hearing this, it's going to probably be out. But, I've got that going on. And for anything and everything I do, hey Remso on Twitter is the best way to reach me. I'm on Instagram as well. It's one of those times where, I get to create content when a lot of people are trying to find things to keep themselves busy. And I mean, ultimately, I do what I do because of, listener support and things like that. Just know that if you're listening, you've got more power than you think you do, especially when it comes to the market that is fandom itself. So, I mean, yeah.
Nice. Right on. Well, you can have yourself a good day, Remso. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, folks. Talk to you later.
Bye.
This podcast is a proud creation of the Mad Audio Lab. For more information, check out madaudiolab.com. Peace Freqs is part of the Liberty Hippie Podcast Network. If you like what we do, be sure to check out Homesteads and Homeschools, Free Markets Green Earth, Cannabis Heals Me, and This Week in Liberpods. We're living proof that libertarian doesn't mean washed up Republican.